You're listening to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community with your host, Ben Wolf.
And welcome to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community. This is Ben Wolf, as always, your host, and I am happy to be sharing today with a message from my guest about the pinnacles and the pitfalls of hiring a fractional leader in your organization. As always, I ask everybody to subscribe, to leave a review so that you can get the knowledge, the information that's shared on this podcast in the future. And the more you leave a review, preferably a 5-star review, wherever you're listening to this, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it might be, it makes the content here available to more people, brings it up in the algorithms and the search patterns and everything. So be a big help to me, to everyone else listening, and to yourself in the future, if you will pause this, subscribe, and leave a review, a good review. So with that, I want to get into introducing our guest today. She is owner of the Metis Group, which helps business leaders frustrated or disappointed with the performance of their employees to improve their selection processes, accelerate their performance, and develop them as leaders. She's been a director of HR and human capital at a variety of organizations for over 30 years. You can find out more about her and her work at themetisgroup.com. That's METISS, themetisgroup.com. And with that, I give you Cyndi Gave. Welcome, Cyndi.
Thank you so much, Ben. Appreciate being invited to your show.
Well, my pleasure. And I appreciate somebody who I've thanked so often on the show here, Jonathan Smith, who is a longtime friend of yours. He was my EOS implementer for 3 years when I was inside a company, helping us implement entrepreneurial operating system, the EOS framework for managing our business, getting maximum results. I know he's helped you a lot over the years, and you guys are good friends for a long time. He introduced us, so gotta acknowledge and definitely appreciate Jonathan for putting us together.
He is the ultimate connector. I think when Malcolm Gladwell wrote that book and talked about connectors, he must have had a picture of Jonathan right next to that because he is the ultimate at connecting the right people together for sure.
All right, well, we're going to have to make a little clip of you saying that just then and give that to him to use as a promo on his website or social media or something. Yeah. But so what I want to start off with is getting into to have you just share like a quick 2-minute background to give people like a picture, maybe stuff that's not reflected in your LinkedIn profile, so to speak, or your resume. You know, where did you come from? How did you get to be doing what you're doing now and sharing about the kind of stuff that we're talking about today?
It's funny because when you asked me to prepare for this, and that was one of the questions, I thought, it probably goes back to when I was a little girl. My dad, who had escaped from Hungary as a political refugee during the Hungarian Revolution and landed here in 1957, started as a ditch digger in a water company and ended as second man from the top when he retired 30 years later. But I remember him coming home and complaining like crazy about the personnel department, right? And the personnel department was always telling him all the things that he couldn't do. And I remember thinking of them as like the no police. And so I remember Dad in his accent, saying, I stopped asking for permission. I'll just do what I need to do, and then I'll ask for forgiveness later. And I thought, well, that's a pretty lousy system. And so I remember asking questions about this, and coincidentally I intended to go into public relations, but there weren't a lot of public relations back when I was in school, and no, we're not going to do the math on that. So there were a lot of combination departments, so I cut my teeth in all of my college summers working at Johnson & Johnson back when they were absolutely one of the best companies to work for, in a combination of personnel and public relations departments. So I was going to school for public relations, but I was learning what was then personnel, and then wound up eventually getting hired into some. I remember hiring in one place and saying I wasn't going to come to work for them until they changed the department to human resources from personnel. So I am a recovering HR person, but I think what differentiated me is really listening to my dad the whole time when I was growing up, who, by the way, I adore and see as my role model, because I always wanted to understand business. How does this particular business make money? How do we align the talent to accomplish those goals? How does this business do it? It's always different. And if you look at my resume, I really looked like a consultant from day one, because I don't think I stayed any place longer than 18 months. I would go
Hmm.
in, I'd fix things and put some processes in place and get bored and then go on to the next one and so
Hmm.
on. So I think it was just a natural transition for me to start my own business a little over 24 years ago. It was actually my husband, 3 months before we got married, said, well, why aren't you starting your own business? And I said I needed to be vice president of a Fortune 500 company first. And he said, why? People call you for your free advice anyway. Just start charging them. And in short order, within 3 months of our first contract, we had to start hiring people. So that's how we kind of got to where we are.
Wow. It's really cool. Actually, your background about your father reminds me about my grandfather, my mom's dad, who grew up in Orem, Tennessee, a town at its height was about 400 people in East Tennessee, and grew up so poor that as a 5-year-old boy, they were just so poor. It was a coal mining town. His father was a coal miner, and they were so poor that I think one winter they couldn't buy even a coat for
Ugh.
him, and his mother knitted him a sweater out of rope, and that was what he
Oh
had
my
to wear
gosh.
one winter. It was crazy. And and again, by the time he went into construction, went into merchant marines, dropped out of school in like 6th grade, and did all this crazy stuff. And then by the time went into construction, they went into the union, and by the time he ended his career, he was the president of the southern region of the ironworkers union,
Oh, wow. Wow.
as just a tough as nails negotiator, who again with his 6th grade
Yeah.
education, and stood next to President John F. Kennedy at at the opening of one
Wow.
of the dams in the Ohio Valley, in the Tennessee Valley Power Authority.
Yeah.
Anyway, so just like the story of your father coming from where he did, and accomplishing what he did, kind of reminded me a little bit of that
Yeah,
personal life.
well, I really believe our heritage, our roots really are, the foundation from where we grow. That was complimented by my mom's mom, who
Hmm.
was from Italy, was sent here when she was 13 to marry a man she'd never met.
Wow, 13.
And third grade education in Italy, which basically meant she knew how to cook and crochet. Shrewd as a just amazing woman, and
Hmm.
her ability to read people, which both my dad and my grandmother needed to be able to do, because they didn't really understand English all that well when they first came.
Hmm.
Well, neither of them spoke any English when they first came here. So
Wow.
they had to get really good at reading people from a survival perspective. And again, pass that along to me. But
All right.
but
Interesting.
probably the biggest lesson from both of them is um, neither were tolerant of the word can't. I
Hmm.
can't. Oh, right. Both of them. You can do anything you set your mind to. And when you look at their background, you felt like a wimp going, I can't
Right.
learn algebra.
Right. You're like, wow, yeah, that's amazing. I mean, so that is remarkable, and I guess it is powerful to think about how our roots, formulate who we are. And one of the interesting things, I mean, that one of the big focuses of mine right now, and of a lot of the guests, not all, but a lot of the guests I'm having on the show these days, is people in the fractional leadership space. I just find
Mhm.
that it's such a little known and little understood powerful tool that business owners, those who it's right for, can use to get, to not just have to reinvent the wheel every time. And
Mhm.
with a team that has never done it before, and they've never done it before, they're amazing at making widgets or installing HVAC
Mhm.
systems or whatever it is that they do, or legal services, but not with running the business and growing it in an
Mhm.
amazing way. And so this fractional leadership, to be able to get on somebody that's been there, that's done that, that's experienced, that can walk them through it, become part of the leadership team, but at a much lower price point because it's fractional, then they couldn't obviously hire someone like that full time. Just an amazing tool. So I'm
Right.
focusing a lot on that, as you know, and we had a really interesting conversation about some of your experiences in this area, of hiring 4 different fractional CMOs, chief marketing officers, over time for your own organization.
Mhm.
What are the biggest pitfalls that you've seen from your own experience in hiring a fractional leader, and from your clients' experience hiring fractional leaders? What are some of the biggest mistakes and pitfalls that people make when bringing on a fractional leader?
Um, for us, and for some that I've seen, part of the reason we bring on a fractional is we can't imagine what a full-time one would actually do. right?
Mhm.
And we know we're missing something. And so we're hoping that somebody who was a leader of that area before, who could help us figure out what's missing, put that in place, and then help shepherd us along. I think the challenge with that is if we're not exactly clear about what we want, they will provide what they're good at, which may not be what we need. It may be what they're good at. So, when we are helping our clients in the selection process for hiring a direct employee, we have a process for getting crystal clear about what the scorecard looks like for that person and what the ideal person looks like to do that within their culture. But it doesn't work when you're hiring a fractional leader, because this is a contractor. And the contractor is coming to you saying, I will do A, B, and C. And it might sound really good. You may need or want some of those things, but that may not necessarily be what you need. And so in our case, and I guess there were actually 2 CMOs, 3 marketing PR companies, one of which tried to transition into a CMO type of thing. I would say the last one is the most successful. So starting from the beginning, when we hired a marketing firm, they did a great job. We knew we needed a website. We had basically a brochure page, and we needed to rebrand and do all that kind of stuff. And they did a great job with that. But then they wanted us to do a whole bunch of other things on SEO and stuff like this, and we just weren't prepared to handle that. And quite frankly, because of the work we do in selection and performance acceleration and organizational health, we're really selling to the founder, the CEO, the visionary of an organization, not to an HR department. So the SEOs, nobody would know what to search for us. I mean, we've been in business over 24 years. Still, when I ask our clients, what would you search for us as in Google? And they're like, I have no idea. I'd wait till Jonathan said, you need to talk to the Metis group, right?
Right.
So we really liked what the first organization did, but then they're really good at SEO. And so that's where they wanted to go. And we finally said, we got to stop. We can't keep spending this money because
that's not what you needed.
That's not what we wanted. So then we went to this other organization who we thought did a pretty good job putting a website together, more than a website, cleaning it up and making it better for similar type decision makers. But again, they wanted to build in things to the website that we didn't want. And when we started to get pretty insistent about what we did want, they really started tinkering around with things in an almost passive aggressive way. So that was sad.
Yikes.
Then we went to a company that was originally, and we're not going to use names, but they had the word PR in there, the name of their company, for the longest time. And they realized that a lot of people, especially when we went through the economic downturns in 2008 and stuff like that, were a little reluctant around the PR part. So they dropped the PR and they just went with the other part of their name. And so when we ran into them coincidentally, I know and respect and adore the owner, and told him what we were looking for. He says, well, we could do that. And I'm like, well, I thought you guys did PR. Well, we used to do a lot of that, but now we really do a holistic marketing thing. We'll look at the market, right? And so we had to spend 10 or 12 grand for them to put a game plan together for us on what they would do to help us with the marketing. And it comes back, and I would bet you 80% of it was PR. And we're like, yeah, no. And, oh, you need to go on Fox Detroit and be interviewed for. I'm like, but our ideal clients don't watch that. Yeah, but that's okay. Then you can just announce on your website that you were a guest speaker there. And I'm like, this is a lot of money to spend on that kind of thing. We also went through things with them that with all of these folks, what we have said, so we've been in business for 24 years, and with one exception, 100% of our business has come from referrals or networking. And networking includes a lot of the public speaking I do to CEO groups and the like. So a lot of our marketing is my public speaking. And yet we've never had a professional look at any of my presentations. And we're like, there's probably room for improvement there, either in the talking points or maybe in the graphics or both together. I bet there's a way
Right.
to improve this. Yes, we get great business from it, but still, that is the number one way we get business, that and referrals. And we have no marketing that targets our referral sources or looks at our presentations.
Right.
So in all of these cases, we told them this was something we wanted. Until our current person from Burris Creative, Jim Burris, he's doing a great job. He's out of North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina.
Burris, how do you spell Burris?
Burris.
Okay.
Jim's the only one who's been paying attention to that.
Right. Who's listening.
He's
It
listening.
sounds like the biggest pitfall you're pointing out is this disconnect between what you as a business owner need and what the fractional leader is is planning to provide or can provide, and really being clear in advance. I mean, what's the technique that you recommend people use to make sure that they're on the same page and that whoever they're picking really is going to do what they need, or they have an expertise in that area?
So, I think the best thing to do is why I think this was successful with Jim. And I think part of it is we were not that clear. I mean, we would mention, hey, by the way, you probably should take a look at some of our presentations because that's how we get more than half of our business.
In some of the prior people, you mean?
Yeah. That we learned, but so we weren't very clear then. And they would say, oh, well, sure, I'll look at that. But then they never did, and we didn't hold them accountable to that. Or by the point where we say, because they'd say, well, we really need to get to understand your business a little bit better. We'll do that through your website, and then we'll look at that. And by that point, we're like, all right, we're done. We're 5-6 months in, we're done. So I think that was part of the challenge. With Jim, I think we went to him and we said, we're clearer about what we want. First of all,
so there's work you have to do as a business owner before you start interviewing people to come up with the 1, 2, 3, 5, 6 things that you really need this person to accomplish.
I think if you can get to the 2 or 3 critical things you need, and somebody focuses on that, they may come up with some other little things you need to support those things, right? But you got to have some clarity about what you need. Or you need to hire somebody who has a diagnostic process. Not just, if I work with you long enough, I'll figure it out. That's not it. What's your process? A couple of them said, we have a process. They get together, they come up with, their version of who your ideal client is and what are some of the words that speak to them. And after they go through that, they never revisit that again, which is a challenge. Because I would say, wait a minute, we told you words that work and words that don't work. You redid some of the copy on our website and you used the words that don't work. Like we spent 3 hours in a conference room going through this, right? So with Jim, we were pretty clear about this is what did not work in the past. This is the type of client we need to look for with this stuff. We already got the really tiny to small size client base. We figured out how to go to the market there. The mid-sized client comes to us through referrals. We need a better approach to go for the mid-sized client. And that's where we need your help. And then we told him things that we didn't want in the past, some new things we were being interested in. And then we asked him, one of the other things we did was we said, 3 months from now, how will we know this has worked out?
That's a great question.
And we asked him.
Right. 3 months from now, what are the outcomes that we will have seen by then?
Right.
If this is successful.
Right.
And you put that in writing?
I believe we did. So I'm the visionary. My husband and marital partner, or my husband and business partner, is also my integrator, and he handles those details.
Right, that's that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm an integrator. I'm a fact finder.
So I come up with the brilliant idea, and John figures out how to execute. Actually, John tells me I come up with 100 ideas. He'll tell me which ones are brilliant. But with Jim, it's been wonderful. The other thing that happened is we did know him for a while, so he was a little familiar with our business. But when COVID hit, we said, all right, forget strategy. We got to figure out 60-day sprints. what do we have to do now? What do we have to do
Right.
next? Basically, let's stop trying to be strategic about this. Although we did say we need your strategic advice, he is very good at seeing the big picture, but he's phenomenal also at coaching and mentoring Jeremy, who is in charge of our marketing. He's my husband's youngest son. He's
Uh-huh.
in charge of the marketing and some content delivery. And so Jim has been wonderful working with Jeremy. I can see Jeremy blossoming and taking some more initiative, even saying to Jim, we need to do this, we need to do that. And then Jim helping him figure out how to do it. So that's been amazing that he's really invested in grooming Jeremy, where we've asked for that to be part of, again, I don't think we were that clear when we said we really need you to kind of leverage Jeremy. He's willing to do whatever you show him to do, but he needs some direction. He's not grown up in marketing.
Right.
So I think being crystal clear about like the 3 things you really want somebody to do, and then asking them how they're going to do it and what are going to be the deliverables to prove 3 months, 6 months, whatever the game plan is, that we got there. Because then you can measure whether or not we're at least making forward progress towards that, right?
Right. Now I know you have. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
What's a little bit different in our, the cornerstone of our business is helping clients figure out a full-time employee, a direct
Right.
employee. It's very different because you set the parameters. This is what you want the job to be. This is what the ideal person looks like. And you ask the person, do you want to do this job or not? It's completely different when you're dealing with a contractor or contract house. They say, this is what we offer. Do you want it or not? Right. And the same is true with us. For different applications, we'll use different suite of assessments. But if we have a client come to us and say, hey, we want you to do a team session, but will you use the Colby? And we'll say, yeah, the Colby has a really narrow lane of applicability. So we'll use our tools. If you want Colby, you need to use somebody else.
Go to a Colby consultant. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But no, we're not going to do that. But we want you, and we want this is how. Yeah. No. Right. So it's the same thing, because if you're hiring a contract house, they're not an employee, and so you don't have the same level of accountability, I think.
Now, are there elements of the methods that you use for finding internal employees that are similar, that are shared with looking for a good fractional leader for your organization?
I think some things are. I think if you get clear about some of the things you value, whether they're core values or things that you've valued in previous partners, because I think if you're talking about a fractional leader, you're not really talking about a contractor or a vendor, or you shouldn't be. It should be really looking at a partner, right? So
yeah, they'll be joining your leadership team,
yes.
Whether it's in marketing, sales, technology, operations, finance. I mean, but they're joining your leadership team. They're, like you said, a partner with you, even if they're there just one day a week.
Right. So I think making sure there's an alignment to what you value and to your core values, right? So exploring that, helping them understand what your core values are, asking them specifically, how do they align with theirs? Have they even defined core values for themselves? One of the things we really value from any strategic partners, fractional or otherwise, is that there is a process. We don't like the smoke and mirrors, little coconut shell games, trust me, I'll make this work. We really want to know what's your process, because that gives us kind of an overview of what our journey is going to look like.
Right.
And we may ask you sometimes, and we do this to Jonathan B. Smith a lot as our EOS implementer. We're like, okay, we need you to go off the reservation for a minute. We need you to just give us your insight on this. You've known us long enough. Step out of EOS. If you were in my shoes, what would you do? Right. And so
I think we might have to delete this part of the interview where we reveal that Jonathan sometimes gives his own substantive advice and doesn't just
only if you beg him and sign a release that he's not held accountable. Right?
And this is not part of the EOS engagement. This is separate. Right. We're ending our EOS session for these 15 minutes. They say everyone, the EOS implementers have a phrase they got from Mike Payton, who's whatever. I mean, one of the ambassadors of EOS and a lot of other things, the former visionary of EOS recently. And he always says, Don't look at me. Don't ask me. I'm just the dumb guy with the marker.
Right. Yeah.
That's
Right.
the
Yeah.
phrase.
Yeah.
I'm sure Jonathan's repeated that one, but
Yes, but
we twist his arm.
Jonathan is, yeah, to us, he's, because I've known him for so long. Ironically, he was born about within 10 miles of where I was born in New Jersey, but we met in Michigan. Go figure. Um, and uh, and so we've known him for a long time, and I've always considered him a friend, a trusted advisor, someone I would turn to when I was torn between things before he was an implementer. And we told him when we brought him on board, look, we don't want to lose that part just because you're our implementer, because those are two different values. But I think you have to be, it goes back to being clear about what you want, right? And also being clear about the alignment of those values. I think, and you and I have talked about this a little bit, about being crystal clear about what you really want out of a fractional integrator. A pure full-time integrator will also champion your culture. They're going to supervise all of your, all of the direct reports, so that the visionary only has one direct report, who's the integrator.
Yeah.
And if the integrator is only there a day or two a week, or 2 half days, that's really hard. You can't put that responsibility on that integrator. So you have to be clear about, what do you want this person to accomplish, and is it logical in the time frame or the resource investment that you've agreed to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was talking with a prospect last night, and we were getting into that, because want to make sure that understanding is aligned, and you don't want to get into a situation of dashed expectations. What if you can for a minute also talk about, tell me a little bit about the principles you use for hiring internal employees. How do you help your clients make sure they're getting the right people in the right seats?
Sure. We have a very defined selection process, and there's plenty of visuals on the website that you already gave everybody.
Right, so that's themetisgroup.com, METISS, themetisgroup.com.
Right. 1 T, 2 S's. That's the thing to remember.
Okay.
But if you go there to the selection processes, you'll see this and some examples along the way. But it's built on it's not rocket science. It's built on a logical process. Pretend you were only going to hire a $30,000 a year person, which is a little less than $15 an hour. If you were going to spend that same $30,000 on a piece of hardware or a piece of software, no one in their right mind would take $30,000 of hard cold cash, walk into Best Buy, throw it on the counter and go, hey, what can I get for this? Right? You get talked into all this stuff that's never going to work. Same is true when you hire that way. If you are going to use that 30 grand for a piece of hardware or software, you would bring together in a conference room the people who were going to use it, who would be affected by it, who understands how it needs to work. You'd lock them in the room and say, y'all aren't coming out until you figure out exactly, what do we have to have, what would be a nice to have, what do we just not need. And then you'd know in your heart of hearts, when you went shopping for it, nothing was going to match it exactly off the shelf. Right? So we apply that same logic. We build out a scorecard, and again, the sample's out there, which is, what are the activities broken into 3 to 5 accountability buckets, which transfer over to the accountability chart for those who are EOS implemented. And then we create, all of the, but it's a little bit more, because we go into what are the tasks and activities in each of those areas. How much, as a percentage of 100, do we expect them to split their time? What are the priorities? And what are the success factors? How do we know if someone has done their job well enough to keep it? And then we take 3 assessments on behalf of the job. Most folks who use assessments will use a singular assessment, which are usually behaviors. Is somebody an extrovert, an introvert, an analytic, a creative? But the fact of the matter is, people are more than one-dimensional. So we use one that's on behaviors, one that's on culture fit, or what motivates people, and one is on personal skills, to define what we need in the job. So now that we understand the scorecard and we understand the avatar to do that job within the culture of the organization, we can tailor the screening process, and every candidate you measure is getting screened against that. No different than the shopping process for the hardware software.
So do you give the company these tools, and then they evaluate each client? Do you do this evaluation process for them? Like, how does that work?
Because we work with a lot of small to mid-sized clients, we've had to design the process so that we can be nimble in their support. So some of our clients are very large. They have a few thousand employees and they have the resources internally to
Right.
do
They have
this on their
HR
own.
people
Yeah,
and
so we
yeah,
just teach them the process and they're off to the races.
right.
Sometimes their HR people in those organizations are still overwhelmed and understaffed and need some help, and we can support that. But then we have the small to mid-sized client who might have 20 to 100 employees and they need help um, executing those pieces. And so some of that is on an a la carte basis, and our staff can help
Hmm.
on an hourly basis getting those things done, like even doing the interviews or the performance checks or looking at a
Right.
culture fit to core values. But when you start with what you actually need, then you can come back and say, okay, this is the avatar. This is pretty close. Where are they different? And then you can have exploratory conversations and reference checks or in secondary interviews to see if the individual has developed a self-awareness. And based on that, have they developed some coping mechanisms? Or is there a blind spot? Is this something we can support anyway? Or is this a deal breaker? And it's not until you get crystal clear about what you're looking for can you expertly evaluate whether or not a candidate is really ideal, and then identify what the development plan has to be from the day they start with you, because nobody's perfect. And so the onboarding has to include where the gaps are from where the avatar was to what the person's bringing, what you found and re-identified in the secondary interviews, the performance checks and the like.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. I think this is going to be a part of the interview people have to like pause and listen to a couple of times so they could take notes and possibly think about doing themselves, or they could contact you through the metasgroup.com,
Sure.
122 S's, and to possibly get your help in that. And I think you've described a little bit about what your clients look like and the various sizes. I'm sure any industry. So that's really helpful. And I think again, your learnings both from what you teach your clients and what you've discovered yourself through your own searches and your own finding of fractional leaders where it sometimes worked and recently worked and previously didn't, I think is really, really valuable for people to hear, in terms of just pausing, not just like looking, hey, I need help in finance. No, like what specifically, what do you need them to be doing as fractional CFO if that's what you're thinking of using, and being very clear about those top 3 things that you need accomplished, and then really exploring that and asking a great question that you said, which was, what's it going to look like in 3 months if you've been successful at helping us in
Mhm.
these 3 areas, so that you could just make it really concrete what success is going to look like, and get a lot more clarity if it's the right person or not. And
Mhm.
also with the reference checks if you're doing them.
Mhm.
So that's really helpful.
The other thing that we found with our process, so say a lot of times you bring on a fractional CFO or fractional integrator because you don't think um, there's enough work for it to be full time yet. Well, sometimes we'll go in and define what that full time job is on that scorecard, realizing that if there are 5 accountability buckets, which 2 or 3 can be outsourced, which one can be shifted over to the controller, which one might the visionary retain, so that it's all getting covered. And then when it becomes a full-time job, and then
Right.
you need to bring it back together. But it becomes clearer, is it really a full-time job or a part-time job? And the other thing that people sometimes don't understand when they're looking at these fractional leaders is that this is an investment, it's not an expense. And so if you're saying, oh, I can't afford these fractional leaders should pay for themselves in a multiplier, not just pay back whatever you're paying them. And if you're not getting that ROI, then something's off. You haven't designed it well, the
Right.
contract's not right, the person's not right. But but there should be a wonderful ROI if it's something that's really needed.
Right. No, it's a great point, a great pitch. the Really, really appreciate that. Thank you for everything that you've shared and taught in terms of finding a good fractional leader, in terms of also for internal staff, making sure that you have the right people and that you're going about the process intentionally and not just based on gut, and where you end up getting in very painful situations, and then people leave jobs and you have to let them go, and these horrible situations that nobody likes to be in. So just thank you so much for coming on, giving your time today, and I appreciate what you shared.
You're welcome. Thanks, Ben, for having me.
Thank you so much, and we'll see everybody else on the other side. Thank you.
You're listening to Win Win, an entrepreneurial community with your host, Ben Wolf.